Hey, welcome to UFO Buster Radio, episode number 95. I am your host, Manny Moonraker. In this episode, we go back to the story from 1947 in Utah. And if you recall that interview that I had that was one-sided because we had technical issues, the individuals that you heard on that interview were Lanila and Randy Butterfield of Utah. This time we got the interview, and still, initially when we started the process, we had technical issues, but we got it fixed, and this is it. Now, I don't expect you guys to go back to the past episode, and I think it was episode 93. I don't expect you to go back to listen to that portion when Lanila first gave her story, but what I've done for you, just because I like you guys, you're first going to hear the original story as she gave it back in episode 93, and then we're going to go into the interview questions when I recently spoke to Lanila and Randy about the incident in 47. What you're going to find is that it's undeniable that there was something going on in 47 and even today that's unexplained, but there's just no way that when you hear the descriptions given by Lanila of what herself, her cousin, and her grandfather experienced back on that Easter Sunday, that there's no way that anyone can say that this is something of earthly origin, but you've got to hear it from Lanila herself. So let's get to it.
This is Lanila Maynard Butterfield. My story is I was from a large family. We all in Utah have large families, and our large family, my grandparents' grown children and their grandchildren had a tradition every year of our life. We met on Easter Sunday for a family reunion. It was Easter Sunday in the year 1947, and we had all met for potluck dinner. The children went to the hills with their Easter baskets. Now, we lived in an area that was basically foothills of the Wasatch Range Canyon. And so if you went somewhere out to play or something, you started up the hills and that, because we went quite high in the hilly area. As myself and my two cousins, they're Walter Jensen's daughters. Their names were Dolores and Beverly Jensen. My grandfather was James Jensen, and we had wanted to fly a kite because it was very windy that day. And as we gathered up newspaper, because we had no kite materials with us, my grandfather said, I will come with you girls up to the crest of the hill, which is considerably higher than the family home. And he brought some glue and scissors, and we cut newspaper to fit a frame that he made for us that was making a kite, and we had a little tail on it. And we went up on these foothills. Now, as we were up on the foothills, attempting to fly the kite, it was a little windy, but off in the southwest area, looking out over which would be here called Union, Utah. We were in Holiday, Utah. These are suburbs of Salt Lake City, Utah. And as we looked out over the area to Union, we were there busily engaged, our grandfather, myself, and my two girl cousins, in trying to get this kite up to fly, which he had put together, a makeshift homemade family type thing. And it's a long ways to go back because I'm 80 years old. I will be 81 on the first day of August. So I'm really getting up there, but my memory of this is emblazoned in my mind forever. And as we were there, holding the kite up, looking upwards, we could feel a sensation in the air that cannot be explained. I'll do the best I can. It was not a sound. There was no sound at all. But there was some sort of tension or stimulus of some kind in the air that would make the skin on your arms stand up. And as we were looking out in this southwesterly direction, we spotted what we call and know to be now as an unidentified flying object. It was a disc. It was a very large disc, and it was, if I could describe it, like two saucers upside down with a dome in the middle, but this one was flat on the bottom. The dome was not very large, but it was right in the center. The color of the craft was, it was, I would call it a brassy bronze, more of a bronze color, and perfectly round, and it stood absolutely still. We could sense no movement of any kind. Trying at the age of 11 to tell you how far away it was or how high it was, it was relatively close, but probably nearly 100 yards south of us, and high enough to, high enough probably to be compared with one of maybe our Salt Lake City State Capitol building. I don't know how to give you figures. Let me tell you this. It was damn scary enough to make you reflect on, is this my last moments on Earth? And my grandfather reached out and took my hand and the hand of my cousin Dolores, who was about 2 to 3 years older than me. I was 11 years old at the time. She was probably 12 or 13. And he grasped both of our hands, and we stood there, frozen in time, watching this disc hover in this area. I've reflected on it many times and thought, was this just something that seemed like a half a minute, or was this something that lasted longer and they had control of what we were able to do standing there? As we stood there and watched this thing hover, it was, large to me, but maybe not by standards of what some flying saucers have been reported as being, but it was big enough to, to fill our local high school gymnasium, fill it very, very adequately well, and it, as I said, it made no sound, but it radiated something out of it, and there were indentations in it, like scooped out, like a very, very, not deep, but a very shallow ice cream scoop would go around and scoop out what you would call portholes. Now, there were no transparencies of them. You could not see into the craft. If they could see out, we were unaware of it. But at any rate, it did have these, like, portals. They weren't real large, but probably about, if you were there and could stand up against the craft itself, probably 6 feet high, the portals. And we watched for a short while, and my grandfather said to us girls, if you ever in your life tell anybody what is happening to us or what we have just seen, I will personally skin you alive. And he meant it, because he was a very stern grandfather. We stood there and watched it, which seemed to me like time immemorial, but I would say it probably stayed there maybe close to a minute, and then with an angle, it was flat, absolutely perfectly flat, but it suddenly tipped on the south side of the craft itself, tipped just slightly, and in speed that I don't know any earthly word other than I am a fan of the Star Trek series. They call it hyperspeed. Hyperspeed would be the only thing I can think of to describe the speed with which this craft went. And it tipped up on an angle and shot upward, not straight up, but shot out at like what you'd call maybe a 45-degree angle. Just forward motion, that, like I say, about a 45-degree angle. And it went with such incredible speed that had you been there watching it with me and it frightened you, if you closed your eyes, you would have missed it. We didn't. We watched. But for maybe 1 second, it was there within 100 feet of me and lost to the cosmos within a second or so. I shall never forget it. I shall never back down and deny that I saw this or had it happen. And as I say, my grandfather said, when we go back down off of the canyon area in there where we had gone up to, where the littler kids had gone up to eat with Easter baskets and things, he said, you do not say anything to your family. You do not ever say anything to any living human being. And I didn't. Now, what what happened since that time frame, when I met my husband in high school, I confided to him. We were high school sweethearts, and we are married now, 61 years. And I confided to him what had happened to me. And still, I never said anything. Then I got a telephone call one day from my mother. My mother has since passed, but I was, a young woman, probably in my 40s, and married with children. My mother called me and she said, Lanila, why did you not tell me what happened with you and Grandpa Jensen up on the hills above our homestead? And I said, well, what do you know? What did he tell you? And he said, on Easter Sunday, I took Nyla and I took Walter's 2 daughters up on the hillside to make them, each one of them, a kite. And then he went through with my mother and told how we had seen this spacecraft and how he had told my mother how he threatened us not to tell anything. And she said, why didn't you tell me? I said, well, he had threatened us not to. Well, by this time, how she had found out, my grandfather died just a few days before that. And on his deathbed, my parents' home was built on the same land that my grandfather's home. He had, homesteaded about 8 acres or so of area up in the foothills. There are the mountains up on 62nd South. Beautiful, beautiful country. And he had given my parents a plot of this ground lower down by the highway where you entered up into that area. He had also given some of that land to his youngest daughter. But at this time, the youngest daughter did not live there. She wasn't, I don't know if she was married at that time. But at any rate, trying to collect my thoughts here, I guess I've lost my trail of my thoughts. But as my grandfather was dying, he called my mother and 2 or 3 others that lived close enough that could come to the hospital because he knew he was dying. And he called them in, and one of the first things he said was he talked to my mother, and he said, I need you to know something. On Easter Sunday, and then he mentioned the year 1947. See, I was born in 1936. I had never put 2 and 2 together. 36 to 47 is 11 years. 1947 was when so many terrible things happened, Roswell and so on and so forth. Well, he told my mother the story of what had happened with himself and us two girls, and how this spacecraft had hovered literally close enough to what you'd call almost over us. I wished at 11 years old and scared to death I was a better judge of distance. It could have been 80 feet away from me. It could have been 180 feet away from me. But it was right there where we were staring it down and it was staring us down. And he told my mother all about this, and he says, I wanted to get this story told and off my chest so that you would know what happened to little Nyla and the Walters girls before I pass on. And that's when my mother called me. I was so grateful to her that she called and told me, because this was additional verification of what had happened. And I just let it go. And a number of years later, many years later, I got to thinking about I should have more verification of this than just what my grandfather had told my mother. And so I called my two cousins, the girl cousins, and they didn't seem to remember anything about it. But I did, and my grandfather knew, and now my mother knew, and it's well established in our minds, and we know it happened. And my son has asked me numerous times, sir, to call your program and let you know what had happened to me.
Hello, Manny.
Hi, Lanila. It's a pleasure speaking with you.
Well, it's wonderful to hear your voice, too. Before
I know.
all I could hear was this grinding, churning sound like my husband outside putting the tree limbs through a wood chopper.
It was really strange, and I wanted so much to ask you a couple questions last time, and I couldn't.
Well, it's like there's something out there in the universe that don't want me to disclose what I saw.
Yeah, but we're going to get your story out, because this time we actually got the connection going.
And it is on the radio waves?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, wonderful. Well, I'm happy to tell you anything you need to know. You can ask me, and I can go on about what you're asking me.
Sure. So in your story that we heard initially, you mentioned that the craft that you saw, it reminded you of the show Star Trek and the way it moved. What was that feeling like, being there and seeing that?
I don't know if there are words that can explain that feeling, but it was horrifying, mystifying, and my God, am I in my right mind? And then confirmation, of course I'm in my right mind. I'm standing here looking at this. I didn't ask for it. It asked for me because it was so close. A kid with a good high-powered pellet gun could have shot up and bounced off of it.
Around that time of the incident, were there any reports of UFOs in the area during that time that you were aware of?
Any reports of what in my area? Other sightings?
Yes.
Not that I am aware of, because we didn't have television. There was no, you couldn't go in the house and turn on televisions. I'm 80 years old, and this happened when I was 11. But let me say this. I was a very smart, sharp 11-year-old. I wasn't a ditzy teenager like a lot of them are anymore today. I was always one of these inquiring minds. I was an excellent student. I have always, since this happened to me at 11, I have always had a tremendous fascination with space and what's going on out there. But I don't recall my parents subscribing to any kind of a daily newspaper at that time either, so I would have no way of knowing if there were other sightings there. But I will say this. If there was any human being, and that was on Easter Sunday, on a Sunday afternoon, and if there was anybody there within miles of that area, they had to see it. But also, people were probably deathly afraid to say anything because nobody wants to be called a kook. That's why it has taken so many decades for things like different Sasquatches or things of that nature. People who have seen and done things throughout history who are called kooks, weirdos. But believe me, I wasn't. I saw what I saw. And I will take it to my deathbed, never changing what I saw.
Yes, it definitely is a fantastic sighting that you had. Now, you mentioned that during the time that the event occurred, you were actually there with your cousins.
I was there with my cousin Dolores, who has passed away about 2 years ago. She was a couple of years older than me. And then my grandfather, who was in his 60s, a very sharp, no dementia, no problems, a very sharp man. And we were both there. We were actually leaning over, looking at putting together the kites that we were trying to make. This is a high area. We live in the suburbs of Salt Lake City, Utah, and this is an area that's up close in the foothills of the east bench of the mountains here in Salt Lake City. And we were leaning down. What got our attention was the feelings in the air. What my son refers to it as electrostatic magnetism, ionization. Anyway, we could feel something in the air.
Right.
We all three looked at each other. Then my grandfather stood up. He grabbed my hand. I remember it because it was my left hand. And he grabbed Dolores's right hand, and he let out a sound of like expelling, oh, like what on God's earth is happening to us? And he held our hands so tight that at that moment, I was more concerned about how hard my hand was being held because he was crushing my hand, and I looked up at my little 11-year-old hand, and it was practically snow white because he was so frightened that he was holding our hands that tight. But then by this time, I could feel the hair on my arms not standing up from static like electricity. But I could not hear anything specific. But I was looking straight into this object hovering in the sky. As I said when I spoke with you previously, I was 11 years old. I couldn't give you, for instance, 50 feet, 25 feet, 75 feet. I couldn't judge from that. Close enough that I could see every detail of the craft, which I might add, I could see them, but if they could see me, which I assumed they could, there was no transparency there. Their technology would have been of such an advanced scale that they could probably see right through their craft and see what we were doing, but we couldn't see inside of the craft. But I'm going to throw out, it was about 100 feet to 100 yards out in the air, up on a 45-degree angle southwest of where I was standing on the hillside, where the three of us were standing on the hillside. And it lasted for some time. If you're having this experience, to you, feels like it's lasting an eternity.
Right.
But it could have been 1 minute, could have been 3 minutes. It's hard at 80 years old. Well, I gotta back off on that one. It's not hard at all because I remember every emotion of that moment. My heart was pounding, my throat went dry, my palms were sweating. I was horrified. You know, Manny, we didn't see things like this. I was 11. I was born in 1936, and so this was 1947. Real famous year, huh?
Yes,
and that's when this was happening.
It was quite the year for these type of sightings.
That's right, and I have read everything I've ever seen. on that year on sightings, especially the famous Roswell. And I've wanted all my life to drive down there, but my husband has always had a few physical disabilities, so we have not been one to travel much. But I'd love to go down there. But at any rate, getting back to the craft, it was large. Now, I've seen photos of those units that went over Phoenix. I think they were delta wing shapes.
Right.
This is a perfect circle. But the high school that I attended, Jordan High School, we had a very, very large auditorium. And if you removed the bleachers from the one side and put that unit in there, it would fill that whole auditorium, from my estimation, as an 11-year-old. It was big. It was very big, and it wasn't making any humming sound or any musical sound. It just sat there perfectly still, Manny. It was absolutely still. There was nothing moving except our hearts fluttering. And it was the color, I like to say, walking around in my house. I have a lovely home, and all of my doorknobs have this burnished brass bronze type of color, and that was the color of this unique craft.
Well, I imagine that since you guys were out there ready to fly a kite, it was a pretty clear day that Easter Sunday.
Beautiful, not a cloud in the sky, beautiful day, and there was no wind, there was nothing else, there wasn't the blowing of trees. However, the area that we were in, there were no trees anywhere at all around us, no trees at all. We were standing there looking east towards the mountain range. We could see, hillside trees and that, but they were a mile away from us or more, maybe a mile. But the unique thing I remember about this unit is we looked at it to see why they had come and stopped within such close range of us. They were looking at us for some reason or another. And I thought, how are they looking at us? There's no up periscope. There's no windows opening. But there were indentations. It was like a small dome on top of two saucers, the type Grandma gets out and gives you cake on Sunday. Two saucers face to face, one on the bottom, one on the top, with a small dome in the middle. The dome was probably smaller than you would think if you're sitting down to make a picture for your kids of what a flying saucer looked like. Right. But the dome had scooped type indentations around it, like an arch. They were not round. The bottom part of the scoop was part of the unit itself. So it was like arches that went around. And I would say probably from where we were looking at it, I would say that we probably saw about 3 of those scoop type units. So there was probably one on the right side, one on the left side, and then probably 3 more behind it. Probably that many around it, I'm guessing there. But I can remember seeing probably at least 3 of these scooped out little configurations. It was scary. It was scary.
Yes, I can imagine being at 11 years old and witnessing something like that. It would be.
Right in, we owned the property that happened on because this was my grandfather's property. His parents had come from Denmark and had homesteaded this whole area. And it was, 8 to 10 acres, I would say, there that went from the street of 6200, which was a main street thoroughfare at that time. And it went right in, and the house, everything was on a slanted up area as you went in there. The house was probably from the road, probably maybe 15 feet higher than the road, and then it started uphill from that point. And so it's like taking a little hike up on the hill when we'd go pick wildflowers, profusions of wildflowers. That is the most gorgeous area you could imagine up there. And why wouldn't some space alien want to be looking around?
Right.
Makes me wonder. I'm telling you, it makes me wonder. Well, I don't wonder anymore, Manny. I know they're all over. They met with President Eisenhower back when he was in the presidency. They're all over. There's no question in my mind. But I don't think it was as well known back then. But I've seen films done on History Channels, places like that, of all kinds of sightings. One interesting sighting, I'm from Salt Lake City. The LDS Church has their central offices there and a huge, beautiful temple. And there was a picture taken of somebody, one late in the evening, where there was a whole, I shouldn't say fleet, but groups of maybe 4 or 5 of them that flew right over the spires of that building. And so we know they're out there all over.
Fremont also.
Yes, I know, dear. My son's over here coaching me, but
No, there's Fremont.
but I think he yearns to have been the one that had the experience.
Oh, yeah.
My husband, my brother-in-law, they all, why don't this ever happen to us? But it happened to me, and it happened to my grandfather, and I never spoke of it. I was too afraid to ever speak of it.
So you said that your grandfather asked you to never speak of it, but did you ever talk about this with your cousin who you shared the experience with?
Never spoke to her about it at all. Well, I didn't see her often because Easter Sunday was traditionally our family reunion. We're a large family, and all of their grandpa's 8 children and their grandchildren. There was a few that had grandchildren. We were a big group, and we had smorgasbord, and we had a great big family reunion. And so I only saw her probably once a year or so, and I didn't bring it up because Grandpa had said, no, don't do that. And by the time I thought about asking her, I knew that she had, I believe it was cancer. She had health problems, and I didn't get to talk to her soon enough for her to be well enough, because I spoke to her just before she died, and I can't remember that one, Ina. But I talked to her sister that was my same age, but she wasn't with us on the hill that day. And she said, well, I've never heard Dolores speak about it. But as I grew up, I was 17, 18 years old, and I went to school with the man I married. We were high school sweethearts. And finally, I told him about it. He was stunned, but I never told anyone else. And then my grandfather died while I was still probably a young woman in her 30s, just having her children. And my mother called me on the phone one day, and she said, Lanila, why didn't you tell me what happened to you and Dad and Walter's daughter? And I said, what are you referring to? And she said, well, I visited with Grandpa because my grandfather had an aneurysm to his heart, and he was dying, and they called in the brothers and sisters to come and see Dad before he passes on. And my mother was, the youngest daughter was still there, so she lives up on that hill exactly where it happens.
Oh, really?
My grandfather had pieces of land. That was a big area there he'd homesteaded. he gave my father and mother a piece of land right down at street level. He gave an older daughter a piece of land adjacent to his house, but he gave his youngest daughter that piece of land right where that happened up there. So the youngest daughter, who had always lived there with her parents till she married and built that house, so she'd always been there with them. And I know she was the first one to get there as Grandpa was dying. And when Mother came in, Grandpa reached for her and held her hand tight, and he said, "Wanda," my mother's name was Wanda, "I need to tell you what happened once years ago." And then he proceeded to tell the story exactly as I have had. "Wanda, I was making kites for Nyla and Dolores when this flying saucer," he cut it short, "came down and flew just above us and off right flat in the air, off of 100 feet or so from where we were standing." And my mother said, "Well, Nyla has never told me about that." He said, "Yeah, because I threatened to skin him alive," which was an old expression in those days. I don't know if anybody uses it anymore, but he says, "I'd skin them alive if they said anything." And Mother said, "Well, I guess you did what you were told." And I said, "Mom, it's the exact truth. That's exactly what happened to me, and Grandpa has given you the story exactly as it happened." And Mother said, "Well, I'm surprised you didn't tell me." And so the only ones I had ever told were my mother, my two sisters that I was close with, my children know, and then a brother-in-law who envies it so bad because he has such an interest in this type of thing, and he yearned to be the one that had the experience, but and my son. But you know, having to do all over again, I wouldn't have chose for this to happen to me, because it was an extremely emotional thing, and for a long time afterwards, I would dream about it at nights, and I'd often wake up and wonder if that thing would come and look us up again. Other people confirm, or believe anyway, that they had been taken during the nights, taken, some impregnated, I don't know what, but it makes me wonder, when we stood there that long, we weren't wearing wristwatches. None of us had the money to have a wristwatch. So we don't know how long that happened, but I wonder just how much they knew about me. And I would certainly have liked to know a little more about them. Are they a bunch of little green men? Are they a bunch of slant-eyed grays? Or are they just like you and I? I don't know.
Maybe one day we'll find out.
Yes, maybe one day. Yeah. But it happened in the year 1947, and that, for me, is a very defining statement. And the fact that my grandfather, last thing he wanted to convey to my mother was what had happened. So I had the backing of my grandfather telling my mother, who confirmed to me that she knew it, and this wasn't something in my imagination. No way, no how. This was a real, honest-to-God occurrence.
So, yes. Looking back at this entire experience, and I know you said it was really scary and you probably would not go through it again. How do you feel about when you hear individuals that have similar experience today and they don't share it? Do you think it's important for people to share that they're going through these types of experience with these crafts and things like that?
Let me give you an example. My husband and I started our own business. My husband was a transportation specialist, registering trucks all throughout the United States and Canadian provinces. And we had actively, at any one time, over 200 active truck lines. And many of them were trucking between Utah, crossing Nevada, down through Barstow, California, and down all in through California. And we have had at least 3 of our truckers, and I knew them well. Good, solid businessmen with big truck lines, and that tell experiences of what has happened to them, especially crossing the desert down there. Mr. Nagel, his nickname was Buzz. Buzz Nagel told us that numerous times he would have these crafts, and in every case they were all round discs. They would start following his truck and would follow his truck for miles, especially across the Barstow area. One day he got ticked off. He stopped his truck and got out. This unit stopped and hovered right off the highway by his truck. So he got a big, long-handled flashlight. He walked over and walked underneath the unit and took the flashlight and bang, 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 bang on the bottom of it with this attitude of, well, be man enough to face me if I'm going to get out and face you. Who are you? What do you want? Why are you following my truck? And nobody responded, and then they flew off. And he said it was so common that among truckers, and let me tell you who else, pilots, to know that these units are out there and they will play around in big open areas of the desert, fly around in different patterns, and that, I think, just to taunt the truckers like, ha ha, we're out here. But we had another fellow who was a commercial pilot. He flew for, at one time, American Airlines and another time Continental Airlines. And he said these experiences among pilots are so common, but we all love our jobs, we love our work, and we're not about to open our mouths because we have had fellow pilots who lost their jobs by opening their mouth and telling what happened. But I can't remember what brought it up. In our office, he was sitting at my desk, and I said, well, I want to tell you something. And I told him my story. And he says, oh, yeah. He says, that's common. But he said, when I was a flying commercial airlines pilot, when I was flying for Continental Airlines, he says, I had one of them play hopscotch with me the whole time I was in the air. He'd fly up in front of me, then fall back and fly along the side of me, and I would look over. I couldn't see anyone in the units, but they were there all the time. It is common knowledge to airline pilots. There was another one who I asked him right out. I said, we have clients who tell us about experiences they've had in their long-haul trucking, and also we've had a couple of pilots. We did all kinds of commercial travel, ambulances, anything, you name it. If it traveled, we took care of their paperwork. And I said, I've had another fellow tell me about what happened to him, and he said, well, I don't like to talk about it. He says, it's not something that I'm comfortable with, and I don't want to talk about it. So he never did. But Buzz, the trucker, and the fellow that was the pilot, so I can't remember his name, but he did tell us all about it. And he said, I'm not the only one. He says, I have friends, lots of pilot friends, who have had them dart at them, scare the living daylights out of them, just dart right at them, and then pass over right in front of the cockpit or the front of the airplane. And he said, smug and think they're better than us and think they can play around and toy with us. Well, obviously, yes, because they obviously have technology that you and I as commoners don't know about. Right. But I'll tell you something. I grew up as a very young child, right at what you call Area 51. I was 6 miles south of the Idaho border. I didn't see or hear anything, but I've heard a lot of comments about people that lived in that area that testify it's commonplace.
I thank you for sharing the story. A lot of our listeners that were listening at the time when we first got your story, they were so intrigued by what you were saying. And one of them, Ronnie Dawson, who had his own experience, he was actually typing in the chat box that he believed you. He believed you. And Ronnie Dawson is actually a trucker himself, so he does drive rigs for a living, and he sees a lot of these experiences like you just said. But absolutely, I thank you very much for sharing that with us. It's an amazing story, and I just really wish that more people would come out and share these experiences, because maybe then, the powers that be would allow some of this information to get out to let us know what is it we're seeing.
Manny, the powers that be know everything about it, and they're half of the time they're meeting with them. They know what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
The politics has become a sewer system. These people are not leveling with the American public. It's worldwide. Mexico has tremendous amounts of sightings. It's worldwide, and it's a tragedy. But anyone listening, if they want to not believe what I say, that's up to them. But as long as I know what happened.
I agree.
And I appreciate your being so nice to my son, and because he has yearned for me to tell his story before. I've never told it among groups of our friends or local congregation of church friends or anything. I never talk about it, which is probably wrong of me. But anyway, I've taken a lot of your time. Do you want to speak at all to Randy? I think you
Sure.
want to say something too.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Hey, Manny, I really appreciate you.
Listen, I appreciate you for thinking of us and giving us this story, but I did have a question for you.
Sure. What's that?
So at what age was it that your mom actually shared this story with you?
Okay, I knew. Matter of fact, I was about 8 or 9 years old. The year I lost my eye, I had it shot out with a pellet gun. I wasn't listening to her and traded my Christmas bicycle for a high-powered German pellet gun, and my friend borrowed it and shot my eye with it. I remember my mother's brother, Kim, that was in the Air Force. He'd come over and visit and would tell my mom about different sightings of some of the and different things that he had heard that was going on in the Air Force at that time. And we weren't allowed as little kids to go out. We were in bed, but I would sneak by my door and would sit and listen to Kim, my Uncle Kim, who was in the Air Force. He saw lots of things and heard lots of stories that were going on, none that he could verify with, pieces of craft or anything like that, right. But knew that the Air Force, especially the Navy, I think the Navy is the one that, personally myself, my opinion, are what hold a lot of the of this quiet, because they traverse the oceans, and they've seen so many craft in and out of the oceans, submarines and massive craft come up in and out of them. And I know one thing, not to get off the subject for a minute, a lot of people some people believe in Bob Lazar and some don't. What amazes me is the knowledge in 93 that he had about an unknown 15, which he was laughed at. And now they have, by colliding electrons and positrons, have created it at Lucerne, and it's an element that exists now. But yeah, I've known since I was a little boy. I would sneak and listen to him when I was supposed to be sleeping, and hear her talking to my dad about it. But mainly, what really intrigued me was when I was 14 years old. I had a sighting. It wasn't like my mother's, where it's distinct there. You can see there's no rivets, no seams, But I was with my father and my mom and my Uncle Burton and my cousins. We were all up by the Alpine Loop. It's up in the Big Cottonwood Canyon area. And it was actually called Tanner's Flat. And one night, it was about 11 o'clock at night. We were just getting ready to shut down the fire, put some water on it and douse it. When we had been looking at some satellites slowly, moving, going around, and all of a sudden, all hell broke loose, Manny. Back then, I didn't realize the importance of it until I got a little older, of watching and knowing how far stars are and how many, light years, how distant, a star is.
Right.
But we were watching in the heavens, and boom, it looked like just 4 stars coming across the entire horizon from the mountain up. 4 of them come together. 2 shot off. I'm talking instantaneously. Now it looked like stars or satellites. They were just lights. They weren't nothing that you could see. And this was at night, but the way they moved, and then all of a sudden 5 come back and were in a pattern. Then 2 took off. 2 would come back. 3 would shoot off. And my dad, Uncle Burton, look at that. My hell, Roy, look at that. And as we're all looking up at it, in amazement, the stars don't do that. Shooting stars take off and then they fall. If it's an asteroid, they burn up.
Right.
These were lights. These were actual. They looked like stars dancing back and forth, coming together and taking off, traversing the outer atmosphere, and it was incredible. But back then, I'm just kind of looking at it and in amazement, and didn't really realize the importance until I got older and learned a lot more from MUFON, from so many different sightings, and more about the crafts, more about so many different sightings and Ben Waters and the Allagash abductions and Travis Walton, who is my hero.
Oh. He's a lot of
isn't he
people's
awesome?
heroes.
Isn't he awesome? And I've wanted so many times, like my mom said, to go to Roswell, but
here's my question for you. So you have this, you've had this great experience that your mom shared with you, and then you yourself have seen all these incidents, these sightings, and they may not have been as close as hers was, but you have an idea that something's going on.
It was something that was not natural, something that it was not airplanes. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The one thing that I want to know from people, especially you, because you're a regular guy just like me, right? We are just we're just here. We're living life day by day, and we see these strange things. What do you think is going to take for us to get to the bottom of this, of what it is we're seeing, and who knows what?
Manny, I've laid in bed. I can't count the thousands of hours watching over and over Colonel Corso and his book, the different incidences. I don't really know. They've got such a tight lid on it. Then they've come out with, it's Project Mogul, it's Project this, it's that. Then discredit the discreditors, and like the Phoenix Lights, where the senator came out later and admitted that he saw the craft right above his head. It was massive, that it was not. It was interstellar. It was not of this earth. But Gus stood up in front of the nation and made a joke of it at first, which hurt a lot of people. Right. But he did make it right. And many other people at that conference. UFOs on Record, I believe is what it was. I don't know, Manny. I really don't. But I do know one thing. Us as human beings, and I do believe that, because I am a God-fearing person and believe in God, it says that there's, Story Moosegrave, they went up and worked on the Hubble telescope because they had to ground the lens wrong, and which made a lot of people angry, the billions of dollars it costed, when they went up and put gyros in it and put them little lenses and then finally got the beautiful focus on it. He said just 1 inch turn, you got 100 trillion million stars. That's just a tiny half to quarter inch adjustment. All of these, the universe is so vast, it's almost absurd to think that we're the only ones out there. I believe there's so many worlds, and they're just so far, maybe billions, millions, I don't know how many years, but they're so advanced. But just look at us since the 200 years, 236 years that we've been a nation. From shooting Indians with bows and arrows to look at us now. In just 200 years, you stop and think, give it 5,000 from now. I don't know, Manny. I really don't. I think it's a lot. I think that we as a people can handle it. I really do.
Yeah. I believe so too. I believe the majority of the people can handle it. There's still going to be your individuals who are fanatics and will probably, make a ruckus and make life hard for those that want to make it work. But we're up to the last few minutes of the episode. Any last words that you want to leave everyone that's listening with?
Yes, I would like to leave it as this universe is an incredible place. I believe that there is a higher power that created it. I believe that that these are beings that are in our likeness because they do have two eyes, feet, hands. I believe that there are different reptilian. There's grays. There's the Nordics, as Tavis Walton said. He thought he was talking to a man with long blonde hair, and he said, who are you? He thought he was there. They're light years ahead of us in knowledge, and where we're at now, I believe that I just wish that the listener would open their minds and realize in just 200 years where we're at, you give that millions of years in a universe that expands, that has no end, and stop and take a look at, is it that far-fetched to believe? I mean, we're already working on going to Mars, and I think it's 2030-something. I hope I'm still around. I have heart issues to be able to see that and be a part of that, because that's going to be fantastic. But I would just leave for people to open their minds and believe that we're not the pinnacle of creation. We are just, this earth is beautiful if we take care of her. But I believe there's millions of Earth's inhabitants thereof. There has to be. Because, yes, you get some quacks, but not millions of people are liars. And I know my mother, she is the most honest person I've ever known. Has never been in trouble, never stole, never done that. And my mom tells the truth. So I am very blessed to have had a mother that witnessed that, to open my mind to believe. Because had she not, I might have been a little more of a doubter, but I am an open-minded person. But I was very blessed to grow up with a mother to tell me a story that I knew was true. I would say open your mind and listen to Buster Radio, because I love your program. And I thank you so much. Well, I appreciate you, and I've prayed for the day that I could get a hold of MUFON or somebody that she could tell her story, because, like I say, her knees are gone. She's 82. My dad now's on a J-PIC line. He can't eat anymore. He's getting some Alzheimer's, and they're getting up there. But my mom's a little healthier than he is. She looks darn good for her age, and she's very, very, her intellect is sharp.
It was a pleasure speaking with you today, and I thank you for calling in. And hopefully,
it's an honor.
We can have you guys on later on in the future, and we can share some more dialogue regarding this topic.
Anytime. And I'm spreading the word here in Utah, and letting and sending, emailing and this out to people to listen to it, and letting them know more about your station. And asking around for any sightings, and if I find anybody, I will contact you.
Fantastic. That would be awesome. So again, I thank Lanila and Randy for joining us on this episode of UFO Buster Radio, and I am so happy that she came here to tell her story. And for everyone, Lanila, that's out there over the years, since 1947, that has had the same experience, I guarantee you there's about 20 or 30 others who have not come forward. And you take that and you can compound that over the years. In the 50s, there were probably another, 30 or 40, maybe 50. Eventually we'll get to the bottom of the story. But it's good to know that even after so many years, Lanila is still willing to come forward and share her story. This is UFO Buster Radio signing out.
Thank you for stopping by.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Stick around and check out another episode.